Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Carl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion, or we want to be contemplative, or simply ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to welcome you to our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that resonate with our fellow friends and seekers here in the desert.
Our hope is that you will find life for your body, soul, and spirit.
And now, here is our show.
Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. I'm Laura Forehand. I'm here with Carl Forehand, and we have a return guest that I'm very much looking forward to talking to tonight. Did you have anything to share before we jump in?
Well, I think I'm going to skip most of the announcements, and also just we've heard Susan's story before, so look back on our episodes and get that episode. Maybe go back and listen to that first, and then come back to this one because we want to move on a little further. But basically, Susan and her husband Rob. Okay. I always get it wrong. I probably addressed him that way several times. Thank you for correcting me. So Rob, they were kind of forced to choose between their daughter and their church, and sadly, a lot of times that happens when a child comes out, and so now you've got to take a stand, and she decided she couldn't do that against her own daughter. She has a TED Talk out there we can make reference to in the show notes and so on. And she can kind of feel. So, Susan, maybe just give us a brief summary of that story, but then we want to move on to talking about something else today.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Carl and Laura. Yeah, I hope they'll go and listen to the whole story because that'll just make it a lot easier to understand everything, and listen to the TED Talk because that really tells the story in a profound way that you won't regret watching. But in essence, we were in the Evangelical church for 20 years. Our child came out, and the church essentially said we had to choose between her and God. And let me tell you right now, anybody listening, the choice is not between your child and God. God gave you your child. It's not suddenly a defective blender that you need to send back because it's not performing up to standards. No, that's what the church of this type does to people, but that's not what God asks of you. So we caught on very quickly that this was a false equivalence to say the church and God are of the same view and my child is at odds with that view. That's not the case. My child and God are of the same view, which is my child's inherent value and worth exactly as they are, and the church is of the opposing view. And so we chose our child, but more than that, we knew that if we were faced with that choice and we had the wherewithal to see it and understand it and choose our child, there are countless parents out there who don't see it clearly and who sacrifice their children. And we've heard from those children, day in and day out. And so we took on this work as our life's work, Rob and me now, to protect these people and help their families become affirming that are all still stuck in this false view of God. So that's pretty well sums up the summary of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, and what I just heard and what you were just saying is that the church, the leadership of that church has elevated themselves.
Yes.
and usually it's about something they don't understand.
Yes.
They don't understand very well at all. But they have convinced themselves that we're right and God is on our side. And so we have authority over you. I don't know if you watched Shiny Happy People.
I haven't yet. I have to get my stomach up to it, I think.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is hard in that way. But when you convince yourself that you are the authority, that pastor, husband, then wife, and then children, and that authority can convince, people are so convinced that they're right. God's on their side. And so they are the authority. They can tell you foolish things like what they told you.
Yes. And I have a gal right now that I'm helping navigate this, who grew up in the ATI, the whole Bill Gothard thing, cult. And the stuff she has to dismantle is so at the core of who she is, of whether she was ever fully loved. She said, I realized my mother's love was conditional all along. And that's a horrifying, horrifying thing to recognize that you grew up in. But that's what is being taught in these churches. It is conditional love, which means it's not love. It's conditional approval, which you can lose as easily as you gain. Much more easily you lose it. Mm-hmm. And so it's that is what we're doing in the name of God. Or wait, what? That's what we should be doing in the name of Hitler, or doing, in the name of the devil, so to speak. It's not God who is rejecting us and approving us of us only conditionally. That is not true. Anybody out there who's listening, that is not God doing that. That's not God asking that of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're getting ready to speak at the Wild Goose in North Carolina in about a week. And so we're going to use our book Out in the Desert from last year and challenge people who are, they're a little more liberal or progressive or whatever you want to say. But I think we're still going to be pretty strong with them and challenge them. Rob Bell calls it a fish standing on the beach. Take a look back at your conditioning. And what we say is, I'm not trying to talk you out of going to church, but what we want you to do is an evaluation. Mm-hmm. Step back, take a break, and whatever branch of organized religion you're in, to really take a hard look at that, because you'll see things you never saw before from the inside, right? Yes. And you mentioned you've been to seminary. A lot of people we talked to on our podcast were people that were church leaders. Yes. That were deeply involved and deeply engaged. But when they took a step back and looked at it and got not a bird's eye view, a fisheye view. I don't know. Fisheye view. Fisheye lens. Yeah. But they stepped back and they saw that the water they were swimming in, the conditioning they had, and they were so deep in it. You're just so busy and doing things within the church that you don't see it until something traumatic, like what happened to you, right? Right. And it takes a lot of courage to take that fisheye view. It takes courage because you've been in it so long, and the more you're in it, the more you feel like you have at stake. Somebody was talking about investing. I've invested, this much money in the lottery. And the other person said, you didn't invest it, you spent it. There's no return on that money you put into the lottery. So, right. But they keep putting good money in, hoping they'll get a return. That money is gone. And when we invest years into a church that does not love us, that will drop us in a heartbeat, it's a very hard realization. And we keep thinking that those 30 years we put in meant something. We'll have some traction, but they don't. Right. And that's one of the hardest things of all. Just like this gal whose mother, she realized, never did love her fully, never did love her. It's hard to look at the church and say,
they never did love me. I was always a product to them. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of courage to see that. But staying and pretending that what you're seeing is not true doesn't make it true. And it only is throwing good years after bad, throwing in years ahead of you after years that you've already lost. And so I encourage people to take the courage that it requires to get up on the land and look through the fisheye lens at what's really gone on. And what's really gone on is the church wants you to fit into their mold. They have commodified you to fit into their requirements for a smooth running institution for profit. Mm-hmm. That's what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The sooner you can see that, the more free you can be. Mm-hmm. And the better you're going to feel. And it feels like, oh my gosh, then what? Then what am I left with? If my mother didn't love me unconditionally, what do I have? Well, that's the journey of discovery. That's where curiosity is your friend. And put certainty aside, which the church peddles certainty, mm-hmm. but mm-hmm. it's falsity. So put that aside and press into curiosity and to discover who this new God is. You've been lied to about God. Well, who is God really then? And you will discover someone that's delighted with you as you are, who loves you unconditionally, who's not going to turn you away because you don't fit into the mold. On the contrary, God made you without a mold. Mm-hmm. So I just have to voice that it's scary, but it is so well worth the journey. It's also scary to stop heroin, I imagine, mm-hmm. but it's well worth the journey.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you, with FreedHearts, how do you counsel people that have come from that type of trauma?
Mm-hmm.
It really is trauma.
It really is trauma.
So how do you help walk them to this new vision of unconditional love, like what that really, really means, and this new vision of God in their life?
Yeah. I mean, there are various steps along the way, but to recognize the harm that's been caused you and to press into a new understanding and to say, and this takes courage to say, okay, God, because God has become a little scary to them because their very essence, God hates, they've been told.
Right.
But to say, okay, God, I'm seeing, I'm wanting to see, I'm beginning to see that what I've been told about you and who you really are two very different things. And I want you to show me who you really are. And I'm scared even to ask, because I've been taught that you will fling me into hell even for asking the question. And so I'm scared, but that doesn't stack up to a God of love. And certainly the God of love that Jesus showed us. So please show me who you are in a way that I can understand it. Hold my hand. I understand that you hold people's hands, that you love, and you are safe for them. I need you to show me that I'm safe for them, for me. I need you to show me there aren't really monsters under the bed. And that is a process for people, right. Obviously,
right?
Because they've been so conditioned to be afraid. I help people, make sure that they get the help they need, that they get supportive community, that they get therapy if they need it, somatic therapies, something that will remove the trauma from the body. And so they can begin to deconstruct these lies. But the lies are what are killing them. The lies are what make their stomach where they can't even, function. They have stomach issues. Yeah, it's because they've been told things they can't stomach.
Right.
And there are real physical ramifications. And so I encourage people to say, take hold of it now. Don't let it become something even worse than it is. Cancer. I went through cancer. Cancer comes from, I believe, a lot of unresolved things in the past, anger and unforgiveness and all those things. So don't wait until you're forced physically, and you may already be there. And I want to tell you that if you grew up in this, you're the child of this, you did not cause this. You did not cause this sense of betrayal. You did not cause the church to betray you or your family to betray you. This is not on you. You were the child who was meant to be loved and received as you are. Any ways that you were required to toe the line to gain approval was a false paradigm. I have 2 grandchildren right now, and they don't have to do anything for me to be goofy in love with them. I'm crazy in love with them. How could you not be? How could a child, what am I going to just sit and glare at them and wait until they're old enough to do something that I find worthwhile? Are you kidding me?
Right.
No, too late.
Yeah.
You can't keep me away from those 2 kids. No way. And that is how God feels about you. Your picture is on God's fridge. God brags about you. God loves you like crazy. And God is, I don't want to really put human characteristics on God, but if God got mad, the thing God would get mad about is people lying to you and making you believe that God is not delighted with you exactly as you are. And if you look at the Bible, you will see that there's one thing Jesus got mad about, one thing, and that was people lying about God and God's approval, people rejecting the outliers, the people without power, rejecting them and saying that was God rejecting them. He turned over tables. He called the religious leaders names that you wouldn't call your enemy, because he was furious that they were abusing people in the name of God. So I invite you, if you are trying to deconstruct this, to go stand in your mind, go stand right next to Jesus. I've spent many times where I'm kind of standing right behind Jesus' robe, speaking out. Jesus is safer than God in our mentality, from what we've been taught often. And just stand right behind Jesus and let him help you navigate your understanding of God and show you something different. But don't let people say Jesus is mad at sin. No, Jesus is mad at abuse of the outlier by people with religion who are lying about God to exclude all these little ones that God loves like crazy. And and reach out to me if you need help with this. I've got resources. I've got, I can do a counseling session with you and help talk you down. I've got things to help you. I've got community online to offer you. So reach out to me, because I love you and the Four Hands love you, and you deserve to be loved. And God has never stopped loving you. God is love. God is the essence of love. That's like walking out in the sunshine and saying, well, the sun's not going to shine on me. Well, the sun shines. That's what the sun does. And God loves. That's what God does. And you either have an umbrella over your head where you can't feel it, or you put the umbrella down and you bask in that love. But the love shines for all, including you.
I remember this from last time when we interviewed you, that it seems at times that there's a lot of emotion. You kind of low key like I am, but I can see sometimes you're about to cry and things like that. There is a PTSD to all this, right? And not just for the person that comes out, but the families of people and so on. I'm just curious. We're talking about leaning forward and moving forward. How do we move forward? one of the things I'm really curious about is how specifically did you get through that PTSD, that trauma, from all of this, from the religious experience, from dealing with the church and the coming out? Mm-hmm. What would you recommend to people? Because I see so much of our religious experience is bypassing all that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's why it's still there. That's why we hurt each other, and that's why right. And on and on and on it goes. But a lot of people are really curious about that. Trauma-informed stuff is real big right now, and everybody's trying to figure out how to fix themselves.
Yeah. This is brand new. We're just about to do a podcast on this, I think, by the end of this month of July. I'm not sure when, but the connection that I've kind of suddenly occurred to me of how much the religious church, and every time we say this, we're talking about the rules-based church, not the all-encompassing churches that really do love everybody. But we're just saying the church as shorthand. That they really are a narcissist. It's like an institutionalized narcissist. And when you read the attributes of a narcissist, it's like, oh, I see. No wonder. A narcissist can't hear you. A narcissist places no value on you except what you can accept as a commodity for them. That they won't hear you. You will not reason with a narcissist. And when I really saw that, it gave me a way to say it to people so they could understand this, because it is traumatizing to spend years being with your tender heart that you've putting it into this institution with people in it that you thought were your family. They say, we're your family. We're here for you like family. Mm-hmm. Well, look at some of the families and like, okay, I see the connection here. But they're not. When you need them, when you need to put your weight on them, you see that they're just not there. They're a pile of cards, a house of cards. And so to get over the trauma, the more you can see that how narcissistic the institution is, how it's there only to perpetuate itself and to gain its own power and money, it stops being as hurtful as it is angering. I've really had to work through a lot of anger at the church, the same anger that Jesus has at them for abusing people. So that leapfrogged me past a lot of hurdles to the anger has incited me toward helpful action, which is what anger is for. Mm-hmm. And when we came into this with our kids, the church had already disappointed us in a couple of big ways. We needed them when we had some issues between Rob and me, just growing pains, and we needed help, and they were less than helpful. They were anti-helpful. Other ways we'd seen them hurt people. Mm-hmm. And so I was already looking at them with a bit of a jaundiced eye, with suspicion. Mm-hmm. But when Ash came out, and then a year later our daughter Hannah came out, mm-hmm. It was just they had used up their chances already, the church. And so it was easier to leave than I would have thought. And I think those other things that happened on the way helped make it a lot easier. But I'm grateful for that. If that had been our first disappointment with church, it might have been much harder. Mm. But we're talking about our children here. And I think that it shows how successful the church has been as narcissists, that they can convince parents that they need to abandon their children instead of abandoning the church. Right. And it's like a cult that convinces you to hand over your paycheck week after week after week to the cult. And you think, how do people agree to that? But they agree to that because they've been promised something they never get, but they've been promised it. And so I say all this in answer to your question, because the more you see it, the more you see the lies, the institutionalized abuse of people, the more you want nothing to do with it. When you recognize that someone's a true narcissist, you stop trying to have them understand you. They don't have the capacity. The church is set up not to have the capacity to understand you, not to extend any kind of provision for anyone who gums up the machine of continued success of power and money. And so, and so don't expect to be the one sitting there, that they're going to watch you sitting there and they're going to change their ways. And they're going to see, because what a lovely person you are, and you're gay or your child's gay. Oh, wow. Maybe we've been wrong here. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so don't throw good years after bad trying to make that happen. Even a narcissist, the only chance that they have of any change is if they somehow see it and want to change. And it seems to me for a narcissist that is a very rare occurrence. And in a non-affirming church that makes its money and continued success and power off of the machinery they run, I think it's a very, very slim chance that they're going to want to change. And so please don't stay in a place hoping you will be the change for them. And, I've heard people say, well, if I don't stay and help them change, how will they change? Well, they're going to have to implode from within. I think if all the people left who disagreed with them, I think that's how they change.
Right.
But they're not going to change by you continuing to go. There was a thing about a guy who was an organist, and there was a guest preacher that day who was preaching homophobic stuff, and the organist walked out during the lecture, the sermon, because he just couldn't take it. And that was a lot of courage to do that. He came back and played the ending because it wasn't the church pastor who had this, it was the guest. But I thought, what a profound statement to make. And when you stand by and let it be, even if you don't nod your head yes, you are giving approval. And so not to stay and listen is a powerful expression of disapproval. And
one thing,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I've talked a long time. Go ahead.
No. One thing, as you were talking and while Carl was asking you that question, we always talk about like fixing ourselves or fixing someone else. But like the truth of the matter is that we don't necessarily, it's not really us that's broken. It's the institution.
Yes.
That's broken. It's the systems that are broken.
Yes.
And that's what I want people to understand. It's like, for so long, I thought I was the one who broken because, I just could never live up to all these changing rules and expectations and things like that.
And why did you think that? Because they told you that.
Exactly. Until they changed them without me knowing. Like everything was so unspoken and unwritten. And so I just kind of had to like guess. And then when you don't measure up, you do feel like it's you, and you do feel like you're the one that's broken and messed up. And it's like, no, but it's not you. It is it's the institution that is placing that on you.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it was only after we left church, we went after that to a really affirming, really amazing, different, small, I don't even want to call it a church. It was like a community of wonderful people. Right. But it was the first time after this whole church experience, we sat there and Rob turned to me. He said, I did not know how not myself I was being before, but this is the first time I feel like I can really be myself.
Wow.
And that is a terrible indictment of the church, but it's true. But that's what cultish behavior cultivates. That's what brainwashing does, is makes you believe it's you.
Right.
It's not you. It's gaslighting. And every bully, narcissist, abuser uses that to their advantage on people who are vulnerable. And Jesus never comes down on the outlier who's hurting, who's trying to make their way. He always comes down on the institution of abuse. And yeah. So, that's been my experience too, Laura. Certainly in church, you know what you can say and what you can't say.
Right.
It just is in the air there. It's pumped in through the air system.
Yep. Absolutely.
You mentioned, you used the word commodity earlier.
Yeah.
Last night, right before bed, which wasn't a good idea, we watched a thing about Central Florida and Tallahassee and the history of slavery and so on. And they talked about slaves as not just property, but revenue,
Yes.
they reduced the expenses and so on.
It's pretty hard to watch.
It was hard to watch. And I don't want to compare one thing to another, but that just what got me thinking about it. And at times I've stepped back from the church and said, one of the things about the church, and this is also brought up in the Shiny Happy People documentary, where there was intense child labor. All of these organizations were run by teenagers, and it was all free labor. Well, the church counts on a certain amount of that.
Right.
Us. And not only, is it better if you do more and keep doing more, but also we pay them for that privilege
of being their servant.
Yeah. And as I may have said before, like Lauren, I don't want to say everybody stop going to church, but we do want you to take a step back and look at all of this. Yeah. Because you're an intelligent person, we're intelligent people. We've done that, but even though we did that for 20 or 30 years, we didn't take a good look at it. We just went along with the system, and it seemed normal. But it's not. It's not helpful, and it's traumatic, and it's not working. It's broken, and that's how Laura wrote the word "broken" down over there. Just step back, take a good hard look at it. How are we treating the least of these? How are we treating the people that are hurting the most? Right.
And it's intentionally. They get your buy-in on purpose. They get you all hooked in, feeling like it's loving, and everybody come as you are, and your family here. They draw you in purposefully to get your buy-in. And only down the road, I had somebody tell me from a mega church in Georgia, a right hand to the pastor, actually. She told me, this was like 10 years ago. She said, well, gay people, when they come, they don't know until they've been here like 3 years that they can't serve. And I was like, see that like it's a good thing. It's right. They poured their heart and soul and their money into this place because you lied to them and presented this idea that everybody's welcome, but they're not. They're second class, fifth class citizens. And that's not a favor. So it's intentional, this duplicity, because they want you as entrenched, just like a cult, as entrenched there as possible, so that when you even think of leaving, you think, oh, but my family's here, my church family, my actual family. Oh, I've all my community's here. Who will I go play, game night with? And they want you as hooked in as possible, because it makes it hard to leave. And they want you to feel like they're loyal, but they're disloyal because they want you to be loyal. And it's when you step back, it's frightening to see how successful it was of them to get you pulled in and stuck. And people, who are listening, who are thinking, I'm going to have to give up my job. I work in the church, or I teach in the Christian school, or I'm a pastor. I know it's very costly to extricate yourself from this. But I think of Jews having to leave Germany and other places where they had to leave everything behind. What a horrifying thing. But they had to go for their own lives. And your spiritual life is not safe in there. And your mental health is not safe when you're held as disdainful to God.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about specifically how can we, like, whether we're still inside the church, outside the church. I may be asking this question for my own personal knowledge, but how can we be allies and advocates to the queer community?
What's the difference in those two?
Well, yeah. So
we don't know.
Between ally and advocate. Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great way to start.
I'm not actually sure I know it. Maybe a matter of degree. Hold on a second. I need to cough. I've got this croupy thing. But it seems the biggest thing is to humanize people that are caught in these situations, to be a human to them, to be kind, to validate the cognitive dissonance they're experiencing. I can't change me, but I'm being rejected for this. It's a lot of internal stress. And for you to come alongside and validate it and say it is cognitive dissonance because you're being taught wrong, and to help them know that they're not crazy, to help ungaslight them. If someone's being gaslighted, the best thing is for somebody to come in from the outside and say, what you're seeing is true. You are seeing something and you're being lied to about it. That is like a lifeline of sanity out of a very insane situation. So listen to people's stories, ask how you can help, offer resources, offer, I don't know, people have varying needs, but can you help get them out of Florida? I know there are a lot of people right now working to help people get out of Florida because they're being forcefully detransitioned by one man in power against every, doctor and counselor and therapist and everybody else and free will and all that. But to be that hand out of there and to speak truth to power, it costs you to be an ally and advocate. But I think of Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor, who said, when you stand back and remain neutral in oppression, you are not being neutral, you're siding with the oppressor. And so you can't remain neutral in this without siding with the oppressor. It's not neutral, it's siding with the oppressor. And so to reach out, to notice people who are hurting, to help them find another way, to get them other community. I mean, it takes something to make an impact, but that's what we're here to do. You're not here to learn, to hear Jonah and the whale one more time. that you've heard 50 million times with zero application to your actual life.
Yeah.
To helping people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for me, like, I want it to be, excuse me, we live in such a small community. And so, I have, I've as a teacher, I've had students come to me and share, that they are queer or transitioning or whatever. And I'm grateful that I'm a safe place, I guess, for them to land in that moment. But I want, for me, like, more than just Pride Month.
Right. Sure.
What can we be doing, that goes outside of the month of June, if you will.
Yeah. It's to look around for who could use help and offer it. And people came to you as a teacher in that situation, someone could say, if you, especially if they've come to you from religious, that's really where the most of the dissonance comes from. But to say, if you guys want to come over and have game night Friday night, you and your friends, we'd love to have you. Develop community, develop alternate community. Okay. If they're worried about God and the clobber passages, you could talk it through together with them as a group. So what you're doing is you're giving them another option besides the only community they know, which is conditional and rejecting, and build people's strength. It's like you're doing physical therapy to them, but you're doing spiritual therapy to them just by being able to gather and talk in a different way and be the safe place, the safe house. We always wanted the kids to come over to our house and be safe. Yeah. So just to offer those, and they're as specific as the group you're in. There's all kinds of variation of how you can be that. But I think about growing up, and I grew up in the 60s, and our house was very unsafe. And there was a Christian family across the street where I felt safe. I know it was before all this stuff happened with moral majority. So Christians were not toxic like they are now. But I would go over there and I just feel like nobody's going to yell at me right now. Nothing horrible is going to happen right now. And to be that place is so empowering to people. And I think from a longer vision, I wonder what might have happened that could have been longer vision for my neighbors who heard the yelling. But then I think we're also not set up with, protective services that can be a disaster. So it's not like there's a good answer that intervention really would have saved us. But, and the church is going through a lot. I've heard it said that they're not going to survive this, certainly not in the way that they have. They have pushed it to the wall, and it's going to break on them. And I hope it does, because it needs to be broken.
Yeah.
So, but the more people you can save in the meantime, like the Titanic, the more you can cast out life preservers and pull them forward, the better.
So in July, June is Pride Month, and July is Disability Pride Month. So how does FreedHearts, or just us in general, how do we reach that community? Because we're talking about really two marginalized communities, if you want to think about it, right?
One is a subset of the other,
right?
Yes, I mean, all you can do, not all you can do, strike that. What you can do is offer what you have to offer. Keep speaking truth. Keep shining light. Keep being a safe place for people to come. You can't go house to house and round up all the people who are hurting and bring them home with you. But you can keep speaking truth the way you do and being an open place. And when people need somebody, they recognize you and they can come to you. somebody that I really treasure told me that she sees us as a lighthouse, which I love, a lighthouse shining away for people to come home. I'm sure you feel that way too in your work. And a lighthouse doesn't go chase ships, but it does stand there with the light, and the ships find their way. And that's what I know to do. That's how I can maximize my resources of time and energy, is to keep shining that light, and people come to us. And it's been a burden for me for years now that I want to save the world. I want to save everybody that's out there that's hurting, Yeah, you're nodding and you feel the same way, I'm sure. And I had to face that I am finite and I am one human, but I can keep being my fullest, biggest, most illuminated self, and people find me and come to me, and I help them in every way that it's possible within my framework to help them. And that's what I know to do the best to reach the most people. It's people need physical help. We can't support in those kinds of, we can't offer people a place to live, but they need emotional, spiritual, mental support. And we offer that and give them courage to leave the church, to leave the home, to end that abusive relationship, to stop listening to their pastor, to stop asking their pastor if they're good enough.
Right.
And so we help refresh their mind and their heart to see things in a whole different way and to find freedom.
Yeah.
And we live to do that, and I love to do that. If you're listening to this, don't throw up your hands in despair because of all the pain and you're unable to change it. You too can be a lighthouse that allows people to come to you, and keep your eye open for people where maybe you need to shine a particular light beam on them to help them find their way to you, to safety. But it's a lot to be able to do that.
Yeah. I love the analogy of a lighthouse. That really resonates with me. And I also think too that, for me, because we have a grandson who has medical complexities, and this just actually happened a couple weeks ago, and this was somebody in the medical profession, but we were like just talking about grandkids or whatever. And I mentioned our grandson, and they were like, "What's wrong with him?" Oh. And yeah. So I think, and it was, I surprised myself, because normally I want to just be like, there's nothing, I want to get defensive, right? So I think the more we can educate people and just, explain to them, again, it goes back to that Jackson doesn't need to be fixed.
Right.
He doesn't need to be fixed. Like, I think if we can stop looking at people, whether they're queer or disabled or you name it. We all have, something that might be a little different from somebody else, and just, look at people as not broken and needing to be fixed and needing to be streamlined into, what society says.
Right.
So I love that you said, be a lighthouse. And I love that idea of opening up your home and having a game night or something like that. And, that when you said that, I was like, that's just so simple. That's something simple that we can do. And but it means so much.
Yes.
Yes. It means so much to people.
Yes. Thank you. I'm glad. And people need to be seen and heard. Yes. And so even to just see people and hear them and validate them. And I got chills right now just saying this. How many times in my life would it have made such a difference just to be seen? And there were a few people, and I remember them all these decades later, but to see people and recognize their pain as they share it, you're not putting it on them. but recognize that, gosh, it is hard to be told what you've been told all these years. I get that. And to respect them. That's what's not true in those churches, is not being respected for who they are. They're not respected because they don't fit into the mold. And so to respect people as they are, that is so beneficial. You're right. You don't need to fix them, for sure. And they may be facing real struggles with finances to get out of a place or whatever. We can't provide that for everybody, or for hardly anybody, whatever. But we can recognize who they are, and that gives them courage to find their way.
Yes.
So I wanted to ruminate about a couple of experiences. That's kind of an old man word to use, ruminate. But just in the last couple of months, and I know you know about one of these, but there was, once upon a time, there was a pastor that came out, and when he did, he lost his wife, lost his church, he lamented to me about, finding work, because that's mostly what he had done, right? I just didn't know what else to do except have lunch with him and give him a couple of my books, which don't solve his problem necessarily. Right. But then I introduced it to you, and you knew someone that was in a similar situation that could relate to him. Then a couple of weeks ago, we went to Texas, which isn't always hospitable to queer people.
That's a nice way to say that.
Yeah. I had, I wore my Mickey Mouse Pride t-shirt and went out to breakfast with
your brother-in-law.
I was wondering whether to say that. But my brother-in-law, his son has come out, and I wore my Mickey Mouse Pride t-shirt into the very small diner. I always have to walk back and use the bathroom, so I had to walk through everybody, and I felt like the oxygen was leaving the whole place. And we didn't talk about his son being gay. We just had a normal breakfast, and then later on that night, his son joined us for barbecue at a very Texas place, and his son sat across from me, and I remember when he saw my t-shirt, he just took it. He had a double take,
Yes.
And I wasn't doing it to impress him or anything like that, but it was Pride Month and so on.
Yes.
And he sat across from me, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. But I just tried to be there and be normal, with him. And I hope that was the best thing to do, but I think that's where a lot of us are. We've had some awakening. We're kind of understanding it a little better, but it's like we're teenagers and we're uncomfortable again about all our stuff.
Yeah. And I think what you said is beautiful. You did, and you used the word normal, which I love. You normalized it for him. You didn't have to say, hey, I love that you're gay. I'm whatever. Yeah. You normalized it. Your shirt went an extra step to say, I'm here for you. And you meant it, and he got it. He saw that, and he was validated. I'm sure he was way more validated than because you were there for him. You saw him, you got it. And especially in Texas, we had a thing where Rob was wearing his marriage equality shirt. I forget what it was, but and he was going in Buc-ee's, if you know Buc-ee's in Texas.
Yeah.
And as he walked out, this burly kind of, not burly, but cowboy guy in his boots and everything as he walked by. And Rob looks very, he does not look gay at all. He's not gay at all, but, he's our age. And anyway, as the guy walked by him, he goes, faggot, to Rob.
Oh my.
And Rob's like, oh my gosh, the things people endure that I have no idea. It was heartbreaking. And Rob's, he's big enough to, he's never been in a fight, I don't think, but he's not easy to just blow in the wind. But imagine a 14-year-old or whatever. It's so frightening. So that was, but the point is to validate and just see people is huge. I love that story of.
I feel like we've gotten away from just treating people
like humans. What a concept.
I know.
I know. And that's what Jesus did at every turn.
Right.
And the church doesn't do this part of the church.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Indeed.
Because if you treat them like humans, then they're not cogs in your machine, in your money-making, power-making machine.
Yeah. It might be uncomfortable to love them. It might be uncomfortable to partner with them in their pain,
Yes. Yes.
And the times I'm a little embarrassed to wear a pride shirt, maybe, but it just makes me think about, like you said, what they're going through, what they endure every day.
And I appreciated what you said too about feeling like a teenager again and not knowing, feeling awkward. And I know, to your point, Laura, about things that you maybe, I forgot how you said this, but I've said things in the past that were like, oh, how blind I was. I'm so sorry I said that, whatever it was, that the church had conditioned in me. Mm-hmm. And when you know better, then you can do better. Mm-hmm. But all of us here are on earth to learn how to shine our true humanity and be humane to other humans and learn to love well, learn to accept that we're loved and to love others well. And it's a journey, and we learn a lot of wrong things along the way and have to deconstruct them, but that's what the journey is.
Yeah.
And it is costly.
Susan, this has been another amazing conversation. I feel like I could just talk to you forever. But I do want to, have you give the opportunity to tell people where to find you, because, I feel like there are going to be some people that feel like they don't know where to turn. And so, can you give us your information? How can people?
Everything is at freedhearts.org, hearts that have been freed, freedhearts.org. And we have community to offer you. If you're LGBTQ, we have community for parents, for moms, and also for dads in separate groups so they can talk freely. We have resources. We have our beloved adventure courses that are so easy and accessible and enlightening to do online, and they're very affordable. And if you can't afford it, let me know. We'll make one available to you. And we have our podcast, and all of those things are designed to support you and love you and encourage you. So please come out and find out what we have to offer. And if you haven't seen my TED Talk, I encourage you to watch it. You'll be glad you did. We have, and write to me, you can connect right through the website, but it's freedhearts.org. And we're honored every time we're able to speak and do a podcast like this. We're honored because I want to spread the love and to tell all of your listeners that they are beloved as they are. They don't need to change a thing. If they needed to change a thing, it wouldn't be love they were getting. It would be conditional approval, and that can disappear. So it's true love, and you came into it in the world, and you will go out with it from the world and from God, who loves you wholeheartedly, no matter what. and people around you. There are people like us who love you without condition as well. So let us be your people and help you discover your own inner beauty as you are, because you are beautiful exactly as you are, and you are loved, and you deserve to be loved.
That's such a beautiful message. Beautiful message. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that you and Rob are spreading that far and wide. So
thank you. Thank you. Well, it is a joy to be here and be with you guys doing your good work too, and just making the world a better place. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys specifically for helping me along in my journey. We've grown so much from listening to people's stories.
Yes.
I could just go on and on about that, but finally in our book that we're about to release, there's a chapter called Cultivated Ignorance, and it's very much about my struggle with, growing with racism and gay issues and things like that.
Yes.
But it continues, and I think, if I would give a suggestion to people, we've got to listen to people.
Yes.
Listen, and Laura says, believe them.
Yes. Yes.
Don't try to fix them.
Don't try to fix them, but listen and believe them, and have empathy and compassion for them, not judgment.
Right.
And I think that's what changes the world. I really do.
I do too.
And we've been growing. We hope all you that listen are growing, that you're gaining things from each of these discussions that we have. I invite you to go back and find Susan's previous. It's on YouTube, but it's also on some of the podcast things. Go back and find it. We didn't get the episode ahead of time, so sorry, but go back and listen to it. And as always, we encourage you to be who you are, be where you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary.
Remember, all that wander in the desert are not lost. We hope that you know
you are seen,
you are heard,
and you are loved.